Something I noticed during the Apple event launching the iPhone 16 was there was only a passing mention of cinematic mode.
Easy to use features like cinematic mode in 4K.
And they used old footage when they talked about it, and it was super brief. So it got me wondering, is cinematic mode dead? Cinematic mode started off pretty promising with the iPhone 13. Now, it was hindered in that it only recorded at 1080 and 30 frames per second. But then with the iPhone 14, they brought it up to 4K and 24 frames per second, which of course, that is more cinematic than 30 frames per second. But to my knowledge, that's the only big update we've had with cinematic mode. And again, with the iPhone 16, they barely even mentioned it. Now, I'm sure there's been some slight updates to the computational imaging aspect or with the new sensor tech, but nothing that Apple has really pushed or mentioned publicly or that users have really noticed, at least not that I know of. And I'm mainly talking about the cutout around the object, the way that it cuts the object out or the subject out from the background and makes it shallow depth of field behind it. And maybe they are improving it on the new phone, but again, I don't know yet, and they didn't talk about it. Now, I admittedly don't use cinematic mode that much. However, I do like to use it occasionally for B-roll, and then sometimes on-camera static type shots where you're not moving. It can come in pretty handy and give your footage an interesting look, a more cinematic, a higher end look, if you will. And one thing Apple did improve, although it was to the entire camera app, not just cinematic mode, that was the ability to lock the white balance while you're recording. Because before, the white balance was on auto all the time, and it really almost made using cinematic mode impossible. It made it really unusable in many situations. But truthfully, with the launch of Apple Log, I have not really used cinematic mode much at all, because when I'm shooting something more cinematic, I'll be using Log, and in particular shooting ProRes out to an SSD or, just internally, depending on the frame rate, etc. But even though I use Apple Log a lot, I would still like to see Apple improve cinematic mode. And to that end, here is what I would like to see. First and foremost, and this is an obvious one, I want them to improve the cutout. Again, the way it cuts the object out from the background, especially on moving objects or people with frizzy hair. Initially, when using the telephoto, that's actually where it can look pretty bad, again, depending on the situation. And speaking of Apple Log, it would be great if we could shoot cinematic mode in Apple Log. And that could be in HEVC or ProRes, but even just HEVC like you can do in the Blackmagic camera app would be great. The baked-in Rec 709 look that it has now can often be crunchy, and what I mean by that is like crushed black levels and oversaturated. But a note here, and kind of a hack, you can shoot in 10-bit HDR and then remove the HDR metadata in post-production, giving you the HLG, sort of the raw image, so to speak, hybrid log gamma, and then you're more or less working with a flat image. And I made a video explaining how to do that, and I'll put a link to that in the description. And I also have a LUT pack that works with that. So it is a workaround, but it is kind of cool if you want to create more, again, in quotes, log footage using cinematic mode. But the LUTs that come with that pack do work with the regular cinematic mode video as well. And in that case, what it does is it takes away the heavy contrasty look, the baked-in Rec 709 look, and gives it, dare I say, a more cinematic, pleasing look. And if you're interested in checking out that LUT pack, I'll put a link in the description. Now moving on, along with offering a log option, it would be ideal to shoot in ProRes, speaking of ProRes. Yeah, the file sizes would be huge, but the quality is also much higher, in particular if you're going to do color correction or color grading later in post-production. And it's just a much more robust and professional codec, and so having that option would be great, even if you have to go out to an SSD or an external drive, whatever the case may be, SD, etc. That would be great if Apple would do that. And then the last one for me would be to offer cinematic mode in higher frame rate, like 4K 60 would be great. That way it would be ideal for shooting slow motion, for when you're playing it back at 24 frames per second or even 30. Just a great way to do high quality slow motion on an iPhone. And again, that doesn't have to be in ProRes, it could be in HEVC, but ProRes would be ideal. Now I'm sure that would require a lot of power, but that new A18 Pro chip, I gotta believe would be able to do that because it can now push 4K 120 using the Fusion camera. Not really sure what that is yet, but it's the main camera, which is the same camera you use cinematic mode in. And if it can do that, 4K 120, you would think it'd be able to push 4K 60 with cinematic mode. Again, even if that required going out to an external recording media. Will Apple do anything? I have no idea, but I do feel like they've left it behind a little bit. Now, do you even use cinematic mode? Let me know in the comments, and did I forget anything? Do you have ideas to make it better? Put those down there as well, and maybe one day Apple will make it better. We'll find out. Thanks for watching. This is Blake Calhoun. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.